And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Stephanie Evergreen. Stephanie is the CEO of Evergreen Presentations. She's an author, she's a speaker, and her focus is on data visualization, which is a really interesting topic today in terms of we're swimming in data, yet more often than not, it is presented in ways that make your eyes bleed. So that's the problem that she's solving in the universe. Anyway, here we are. Welcome aboard, Stephanie. How are you?
Thanks for having me. What a great intro. Talking about eyes bleeding is perfect.
Right. What better intro than that if there's a body part that is damaged? So there's lots of different pieces to you, right? There's your PhD, so there's an academic piece. You've got this content that you've created. You're speaking, you're writing, etc. So let me first start by asking the obvious question of how the hell did all this happen? How did you get here?
I ask myself that question all the time. I was just being an academic. I was at the university doing a lot of research, and we ran a lot of surveys, especially for like nonprofit groups. And we'd be responsible for analyzing the data because we're the nerds who know how to do that.
Yep.
We'd have to give the data back to them. Like, here's all the stuff that we learned. And I knew when I was delivering this stuff back that it was terrible, that it was making my eyes bleed. And I was the one who was the most interested, right? Like the biggest nerd about it. So I figured if I was having this rough of a time, my audience was probably having an even rougher time understanding the insights that I had. So that's when I knew I had to start looking into data visualization.
Got it. So now you have that aha, and that leads you to sort of not totally depart, but leave sort of an academic surrounding and start to move into client engagements. And you've got to get that content out there. You've got the book, you've got the speeches, etc. Tell us a little bit about the journey of sort of putting the content together and codifying and getting your thinking out there in ways that are beneficial to both you and the reader.
Yeah, well, unlike most people, I was so fortunate that when I was at the university, I got free tuition. So I was in the middle of a PhD program while I was doing all this survey work. And it was fine, going along really well till they were like, and now you write a dissertation. And I didn't know what I even wanted to write about. So I picked data visualization as my topic. So I had this wonderful opportunity to just become like the expert in what the world knew about this topic. So I got to dive deep into that. And at the same time, this was like right when blogging was getting really popular.
Sure.
So I started a blog on data visualization, just really talking about the things I was finding in my literature review.
So let me ask a quick question on that. So the first piece, and I've seen people make this transition in a good way, and I've seen people fail miserably. Moving from an academic environment, which has its own sort of quirks and rules, and we honor publishing, but only in sort of academic journals and all that sort of stuff, to more of a mainstream. Like, what is the change or the changes in some of the thinking that you had to embrace to go? Because it wasn't just like, let me just do more of what I'm doing on the academic side and things will happen.
Yeah, well, I felt like I didn't have much of a voice when I was at the university. Like, they kind of wash out of you all of your character. I don't know if that's a good way to put it, but you have to adapt this very like passive academic vocabulary that is hard. It's hard to write, and it's hard for people who are reading it to make sense of it. They're like, okay, so what? And the academic is back there going, well, the data might suggest one day with future research, we'll might be able to tell. And if people just want to learn stuff and get some insight and move on. So the blog is a way to get my voice out there where it didn't have to be academic. And I'll tell you, I did get pushback from my academic colleagues about it because it was just it was not keeping the tradition.
Well, and I see, and I'd love for you to comment on this because you've been on both sides. There's this inherent, sometimes it's healthy, sometimes it's not, conflict between the academic world and the applied world, right? So if I am a consultant that dives deep with real clients, solving real problems, doing real things, I could get my card punched at a couple places, and there's respect and admiration. But some academics might look at that and go, "Oh, poo!" But there's no, third-party validation, and you haven't been published in blah 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 academic journal. And then the same holds the other way, right? Where the consultants look at the academics and go, yeah, 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 you've got all these initials, all these letters after your name, but have you ever worked in real situations? So how you've done both well. So give us some thoughts around that.
Well, I always tell people I think journals are where data go to die.
No kidding.
Because nobody reads those things. And I mean, what's the point of all that research we conduct? What's the point of the millions of dollars thrown at universities for their research centers if we're not going to actually make use of that data, like out in the real world,
Yep.
saving people's lives, enhancing their quality of life? There is no purpose to that work otherwise. And you know what? Truth be told, most academics are consulting on the side. In fact, yeah,
Yep.
universities are set up this way, right? Like an academic, a professor can contract out sometimes up to 200% of their salary in external contracts where they're there doing the applied work as well.
Yep.
So I think my suspicion is that academics don't want to have to actually incorporate real applied work into their professor part of their lives because it would mean having to like rewrite their slides and they don't want to.
So that's almost a translation function, right? Because the standards in academia, you couldn't take the stuff that you'd present at an academic conference and put it out in front of a corporate audience. They'd fall asleep if not, throw things at you.
It's true. And I do these workshops with higher education all the time. I was at the University of Michigan last month doing a
Yep.
workshop in front of
Yep.
like 350 people and they're eating it up because they know that that there's a better way to do this stuff. They just haven't had the permission culturally to do it.
Got it. Okay, so that's interesting in terms of the balancing piece there. As you start moving more and more into non-academic thought leadership, if that's a thing, right? Just regular old thought leadership. Now you've got a book that books that you've put out there, speaking, etc. Let's talk about books for a little bit in terms of at what point did you make the decision of I need to have the book that tells my story, my version of data visualization.
I looked into it honestly. The publishers at Sage were looking for a data visualization book, and they approached me about it. I did not approach them, and it was partly because I had the blog, and they could read the blog without ever contacting me and see my voice and my thoughts and the kinds of things I was sharing. And they said that's what we want to have in a book. So they're the ones who put it together.
Okay.
I didn't actually think I wanted to do a book when they offered it to me. I was struggling with it. And then I met a consultant who said his book was his best business card, which was an interesting way to think about it.
Sure. So 2 points there that I think are interesting is that you didn't go to market for the book, but everything that you did in the blog, which you didn't start the blog with the intent of I will do this so that in 17 months from now someone will call me to write a book, right? But as they started, the publisher started searching for an expert. You are now the de facto domain expert in this space that they thought there was a need for a book for. Is that fair?
Yeah, exactly. And you're exactly right. I've always done the blog to teach for free, to give people free advice. And I guess that's been a really great marketing. And I didn't know that it was
Yep.
called content marketing at the time, but I think it falls under that.
Got it. Okay, so the getting the book deal was a little bit non-traditional. They came looking for you. That's pretty cool. Takeaway there is the more stuff that you put out, there's second and tertiary benefits you couldn't even imagine early on. Now that the book's been out, what did you learn about that whole sort of the whole publishing world? Where were you potentially disappointed? Where were you really taken, blown away in a good way? What were some of the things that happened and that you would definitely incorporate again if you were to write another book?
Yeah, so I've had 3 books, 2 in their second edition, which means I've gone through this publishing process 5 times. And I'm telling you, I never want to do it again. And I say that every single time because it is an amazing amount of work, so much more work than I ever thought it would be. And some of it's just emotional labor. Like, I have to read my own words 3 times at least, so closely that I'm looking for like errors in syntax and commas. And there is a copy editor, but still, like the third time you have to read your own stuff, you're like, oh my God, I think my eyes are going to bleed, right? You're back in that place where you just are so sick of yourself and sick of your own stuff that you're glad to get it out the door. Yeah.
Yep.
But I mean, there have been lots of good experiences too. It's just really lovely to see it in print. And the first book that I published, there were people who came up to me at a conference and they were like, "Oh my gosh, that's her. Let's go see if she'll autograph our books." And it was just an otherworldly experience for me.
What are doors that you believe have opened directly as as a result of having a book that weren't open for you prior?
Well, I think that some of the workshop clients I'm able to attract are bigger and higher quality because there is this legitimacy of the book out there. Multiple books definitely helps with that. I don't know if I would be able to get them otherwise, maybe with just a lot more hard work. Word of mouth is such a powerful thing in the workshop industry that sells a lot of my stuff. But having the book is this legitimacy, I think that gets better, bigger clients.
And does that spill over into fees?
It certainly does, yes. And I tell people too, hey, if you can't afford a workshop, that's cool. So much of my content is in the book. It's like a very cheap way for you to get access to this information.
Got it. Got it. Any other doors that have been opened in terms of speaking or someone reading the book and then it bubbling up?
Well, I think I get more offers to write, even more. And as much as I like to think I'm done with it, I finally resigned myself to the fact that I'm a writer and I just need to just do the writing. Because when people see my book and they're like, "Oh, she can write well, she can write on time, and accessible, and it's very highly readable," and they ask me to write for them. So, for example, the Data Visualization Society just launched this brand new publishing platform inside Medium,
Yep.
and they asked me to write one of the launch pieces because they knew it's a big name. She can write well. She can do it on time.
So it's putting you at the top of the pile when people are searching for an expert in the space. Any instances where you could recall that it might have been a tiebreaker, like, hey, they were looking at you and two or three other experts in the field, but because of the book X happened.
Well, I can say that there are some groups that I know of who bring in speakers that they consider high quality, and they define that to mean have a PhD and have a book. And that does distinguish me from a lot of the other people in the field, even other people who have written books. Very few are PhDs. So I know that those two things together tend to add up to some major credibility.
Got it. What are the other formats or modalities that you have now or are considering putting the content in to have more impact and reach more people, right? Because you can only do so many workshops per day, week, month, whatever. So what are the other things that you're thinking about to get it out there more?
Yeah, so I started an online workshop where I've got modules, tutorials with basically all of my content in it. And I've been selling access to that for about 3 years now. And that initially was supposed to be a medium expense way to get access to my content because I had so much demand for my open available travel days that I thought this will be a way I can get some people access without having to travel to them.
Sure.
That only ended up getting a higher demand for in-person workshops. So it didn't quite work out the way that I wanted it to in terms of my schedule, but it has reached access to a lot of people, especially international folks who desperately want to learn this stuff but can't necessarily afford to fly here or to get me to fly out there.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So it's given you some real time sort of feedback and intelligence on what the market wants and how to meet that need, as well as getting you into other markets. What are the things that you would recommend people think about? Because it sounds like your book happened in a little bit of a non-traditional way. What things would you advise someone that's earlier on than you in their sort of thought leadership journey? What should they do more of? What should they do less of?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of finding something that people aren't really talking about yet. And the more the data viz field has been growing, the more crowded it is. So finding a unique niche to stand yourself out from everybody else gets harder and harder. But for sure, there's stuff out there, there's territory that folks haven't covered yet. So I would say find that niche and grow it.
But when you find that niche, so let me, I mean, it sounds like in your space, there was sort of the perfect storm of there weren't 1,000 other experts like there might be in persuasion or negotiation or whatever, but it wasn't too soon, right? Because there's a Goldilocks problem of you don't want to be the first kid on your block talking about a specific piece of content because then you're burdened with teaching the audience or the potential buyer that this is actually a problem that needs solving. And if there's too many, it's commoditized. So how do you How do you sort of judge that?
Yeah, it was. I mean, honestly, so much of it was just luck and timing because it really was me coming in at this Goldilocks moment, as you put it. What a great phrase for it. And I get grad students who ask me all the time, how do I do what you did? And I don't know that there's that much of an answer because it's just, first of all, a whole lot of hard work. I feel like I'm marketing, writing, social mediaing all the time. And part of it is just right place, right time. So it's a little hard to necessarily replicate. But I do think that finding that thing that no one else is really addressing yet and addressing it is how you get yourself more attention.
Got it. But I would say that the hard work, the writing, the research, the things that are more traditionally academic, there are lots of people that can do that fairly well in their respective domains. I think you brush through fairly quickly the piece where people struggle, which is the marketing and the social media piece, because most academics could have nothing better than a cursory understanding of any of those and still be wonderful academics. How have you embraced that and mastered that and use it? Because that's the differentiator.
Yeah, and I think again, like it's been for me the same philosophy as when I started the blog. It's just me and my own voice. So it's stuff that I would be doing, thinking about, talking about anyway. I'm just doing it. Like social media. If you think about an average academic who thinks they're not good at social media, they're probably on Facebook like 10 times a day, just like everybody else is.
Right, right.
So not be on Facebook at work, talking about work stuff, having a work Facebook profile. I think we just don't often consider that we can marry these two parts of our lives, but we can. And the more we do, the more we are our authentic selves, the more other people are going to respond to that. I found that to be so true in my career.
No, that's great. That's great. So as we start to wrap up here, any final thoughts or advice to folks that are out there in terms of you should do more of this or do less of this, or don't be afraid to try things that others think are silly, or give us some words of wisdom?
Yeah, I tell this to my mentees that you got to lean into what makes you different. And it's just picking back up on the last thing that I was saying here, but there are tons of people out there who pretty much do what you do, especially in data viz and how crowded this field is. But the more you lean into your quirks and what makes you characteristically different than everybody else, the better it's going to be. So, for example, I care a whole lot about social justice, and I make that incredibly clear in everything that I do. And that might mean some clients say no, that's okay. They're probably not going to
Sure.
be a good fit for me anyway. But the more that I do that, the more I get people reaching out to me saying, thank you so much for being so clear about where your values are. It makes me feel really good. It makes me want to work with you.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate everything you shared with us today, Stephanie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And lots that we can all learn from what you've shared with us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.